Welcome back to The Legal Brief, the show where we crush the various legal myths and misinformation surrounding various areas of the gun world. I'm your host, Adam Kraut, and today we're talking about one of the most controversial topics, carrying a modified handgun.
Have you ever wondered how many things you can attach to your gun with the KDG Connect and side lock mounts? It's a lot. But just because you can, doesn't mean you should. Kinetic Development Group. Keep it simple, stupid. To get 10% off your entire order, use the code TGC10 at kineticdg.com.
Anywhere you look on the internet, you can find a variety of keyboard commandos repeating the same old tired line that carrying a modified gun will result in you being Bubba's new best friend. Of course, they don't provide any examples or other facts to actually prove any of this, so the question a lot of you want answered is, if you carry a modified gun, are you going to be prosecuted should you need to actually use it? I'll begin with stating that I have been unable to find a documented instance where a modified gun was the entire basis for a criminal charging and conviction in relation to a self-defense shooting. There also seems to be a similar point of contention floating around there in internet land where carrying a caliber outside of what police carry will end up with a similar result, that is, prison with Bubba. I did find one case where a gentleman used a 10mm in self-defense and was actually convicted of second-degree murder out in Arizona. Now, it appears it wasn't because he used 10mm itself, but rather the jury and prosecution didn't actually believe he used it in self-defense. And let's face it, 10mm is the best millimeter. There will be a couple of news articles in the description down below which describe the incident so you can see what happened for yourself. So, let's start with the basics of what happens after a self-defense shooting. After the police come to collect the evidence, they discuss with the district attorney whether any action should actually be brought. Ultimately, it's up to the DA whether or not to charge you. If the DA declines to press charges, then we don't need to worry about anything because you're not getting charged. However, if the DA does decide to press charges, you're entitled to a trial, should you not decide to take some sort of plea deal. Yay, due process! Woo! So what about this modified gun? Where does that actually come into the equation? Well, unless your jurisdiction has some sort of statute which would make modifying a firearm illegal or impose some kind of enhanced penalty if it's used in a crime, it really doesn't come into play at all. For example, if you were involved in a shooting with a modified gun that you believe was self-defense, and the DA disagreed saying you committed murder or manslaughter, the charge is really only still going to be murder or manslaughter. Can the DA, through a firearms expert, introduce evidence that your gun was modified? Sure. Can the DA really harp on the point to make it seem like you modified that gun with the intent to kill? Yeah, absolutely. Is it going to have an effect on the jury? Possibly, but who knows? But does that have anything to do with the underlying murder or manslaughter charge? No, it doesn't. Those have separate elements of which the gun has no part. However, it doesn't mean the jury won't take the gun into consideration even though it has nothing to do with the underlying crime or the elements of it, like intent. I took a moment to speak with one of my colleagues who's a former DA and now a defense attorney because he saw the light and came over to the dark side. I asked him in his experience if this ever came up in discussion when deciding whether to charge an individual or in his defense of them. He said in over 20 cases where individuals used a firearm in self-defense, he never heard of it raised. And in fact, in half of them, charges were never even filed against the person. However, it's not to say a modified gun could not potentially cause you some trouble. So say for instance, you've modified your trigger in your gun to be a little bit lighter and you end up in a situation where you need to draw it. Well, if you negligently discharge the firearm, it's possible you could face charges for criminal negligence. Instead of murder, you could face manslaughter charges because the mens rea or state of mind, for those of you that didn't go to law school, to have murdered someone did not exist. So your state of mind wasn't there, you didn't mean to do it. In short, carrying a modified gun is not something that will absolutely result in you ending up next to Bubba in prison. However, a number of factors are involved, including what you say to the police after the incident. Here's a hint, call your lawyer and be quiet. Whether the DA decides to press charges, how good your lawyer is, and ultimately, should it make it to trial, who's on the jury? I'll put a link down in the description to the Firearms Expert Testimony during the trial of George Zimmerman. The Zimmerman trial was actually really fascinating to watch, and you'll learn a lot of interesting things from doing so, but ultimately, as you guys know, Zimmerman was found not guilty under the traditional self-defense defense rather than the stand your ground defense the news kept talking about. Hopefully that video is going to give you an idea of what the firearms expert actually testifies to and does in court, and an overview of how the proceedings generally work. So, to wrap this up, is it a guaranteed ticket to jail? No. Is it something that could potentially cause you a headache? Yeah, possibly. It's all going to depend on the circumstances surrounding the incident and the attorneys involved. Obviously, you'd want to check your state-specific laws to make sure there's nothing in your jurisdiction to the contrary with regards to modifying your firearm. So, should you carry a modified handgun? Ultimately, that's only something you can decide, but I hope this video has given you some information to better make that decision. As always, if you have a question you want answered on this show, do me a favor, leave them down in the comments below. Make sure to like The Gun Collective on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Full30, Snapchat, and wherever else you can catch us on social media. And as always, thanks for watching.